Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. This monthly wrap up for April is going to be a little different than my usual reviews. First of all, I'm having some White Claw. This one is a lemon. I like it a lot. So I'm having some White Claws. I've only slept 4 hours in the last 24 hours. So it seemed like a good time to sit down and film all the books that I read this month. So let's crack right into it. So, this is in no particular order, but just to start off the conversation, this month I read, finally, The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas, which has been very popular, very hyped, and I understand why this book's message is very important. I do recommend that everyone read it because the perspective and the morals, the message of this book is very important. It's very relevant. This book is about a young Black woman named Star. One night she witnesses one of her close friends be murdered by a policeman when he pulls them over, claiming that her friend Khalil was speeding. And so this book explores Star struggling with the duality of her life between her Black friends and her white friends, and how she behaves when she's on the wealthier side of town versus how she is when she's on the poorer side of town where her family lives. But most importantly, as she was the only witness to Khalil's death, how does she express that? Does she share the story? Does she be upfront and honest about what happened, which is that the police officer was in the wrong in this case? So, that being said, I do feel badly rating this book less than 5 stars because I cannot stress enough the importance of this novel. However, narratively, it did have some weak moments for me. For starters, this book is very character driven. It's not very heavy on the plot. It more focuses on Star's internal struggle. And this leads to there being some slower moments in the book where there's not really much happening, like Star's just kind of going through her life and mulling things over, which is, fair and realistic, but when you're reading a book about it, it doesn't always make for the most exciting reading. Also, that being said, that it's very character driven, not all of the characters are, or felt to me, very fleshed out, very three-dimensional. One of the major characters, Chris, Star's boyfriend, really didn't have much of a character outside of his relationship with Star. He was really just there to support Star and kind of, play her foil. He's like a rich, straight, white man, and he doesn't have the same struggles that his girlfriend and her family has. But again, he had no function or no purpose outside of being Star's boyfriend and being there for her. So overall, this book was good. I enjoyed it. I highly recommend it. I think this is a book that is like everyone should read this book, but it was just lacking in some areas for me. I think there are ways that it could have been made stronger, but still a very good book. Okay, Girls in the Moon. I think this is the first book that I read this month. Okay, so this was not the first book that I read this month. I have read so many books this month, and it's been such a long month that I've forgotten what I've done. Anyway, this is Girls in the Moon by Janet Mcnally. This book was completely decent. It was fine. This book, I know I'm like reaching back in my mind trying to remember what this book was about. I'm pretty sure that I picked this book up because the main character's name is Phoebe, and if I find someone else whose name is Phoebe, I'm immediately obsessed because it doesn't happen much. I'm trying to remember the plot. I remember, okay, Phoebe's parents are separated. She has a best friend that Phoebe's parents are separated. They both used to be really popular, grunge rock musicians back in the 90s. She has an older sister, Luna, who is also becoming a musician. Phoebe's kind of struggling. Is it the summer before her senior year? Ooh, she's visiting her older sister Luna in New York. She's talking to one of Luna's friends, a boy, like that's her romantic interest. And she's also trying to rekindle a relationship with her father, whom she hasn't spoken to in several years. To me, just the fact that a month after reading this book, I'm struggling to remember finer plot points really speaks to how kind of mediocre this book was. I think if you were a young girl in high school, you would enjoy this book. You would probably connect to the characters, but I'm an adult and I'm more well-read, and I just expect more from my books than I got from this one. But that's not to say that it's bad in any way. It's just not very strong. So that is Girls in the Moon. And you know, while we're doing YA, let's hop over to Sarah J. Maas's latest book, Crescent City, House of Earth and Blood. We have a lot to unpack on this one, unfortunately. Honestly, I'm kind of tempted to just read off my Goodreads review because I feel like it would hit on everything that I need to say. This review is tagged for spoilers, by the way. Let me try to give a rundown of, like, a synopsis. I don't think I did in my review. Honestly, this one is kind of hard to give a synopsis on. It's about a human girl. First of all, I had heard a lot of people being like, it's an urban fantasy, it's not what you'd expect. But I didn't understand what that meant. So Sarah J. Maas, if you haven't read her, writes YA fantasy. She's written 2 other series, A Court of Thorn and Roses, did a video on that, and Throne of Glass, which I love. But those are set in like the typical fantasy realms that are basically medieval, like Europe. And this, so when people kept talking about urban fantasy, I was like, okay, so they're in a city, so what? There's still magic, but there's also things like cell phones and public transportation and USB drives, and it was kind of weird to adjust to. I have never read an urban fantasy before, so that was kind of an adjustment for me, and also from the writing style that I was expecting from Sarah J. Maas. Back to me trying to make a synopsis over this book. So the main character, Bryce, this is going to be like all spoilers though. But, you know what? If you don't want spoilers on this book, skip until I put it down. But so the beginning of the book starts out talking about Bryce hanging out with all her friends. Then all of her friends end up getting horribly murdered while she's out. This is like the first 70 pages. It is such a roller coaster. Bryce like goes out with a different friend. She gets like really drunk. She gets really high. She like sleeps with random people in the bathroom. When one of her friends that's like at home while she's going out is somebody who like asks her on a date, and she's like gonna finally give him a chance. And I thought we were setting up like this really fun friends to lovers romance, but really got played on that one because again, like first 70 pages, Bryce comes home from the club and everyone's murdered. And then the book is basically trying to solve the murders. And again, I should probably just read my review, which is more thought out than my ramblings will be. Buckle your seatbelts, friends, because I have a lot to say about this book. Here, let me hold my laptop. That makes this easier on my eyes as well. For starters, I really wanted to like this book. I was so excited for it to come out. I had high hopes for a book series that Sarah J. Maas would give as much attention and care to as Throne of Glass. Reader, or viewer, it was not this book. Make no mistake, this is a romance book in a fantasy setting. The main plot and point of this book is Bryce and Hunt getting together, which isn't in and of itself a flaw, but I feel like it's important to know going into reading a fantasy book. Furthermore, this book was really confusing. It was especially confusing at the beginning when Maas was dumping world-building details, but it didn't really get any better. I still don't know what the deal is with the Horn of Luna, or how the drop works, or like why the drop is a thing. The Horn of Luna, I really can't explain to you. It's a big plot point in the book that I really don't understand at all. The drop is something that the characters in this book are, for the most part, magical. Bryce is half magical creature, fae, I think. Yeah, half fae and half human. So there are humans in this world, but the humans are terribly oppressed by all the magical creatures who have more power than them. Moving on. Okay. Oh, sorry. The drop is some kind of process that the magical creatures undergo. It doesn't make them completely immortal, but it does extend their life and make them much more difficult to kill, and I think to get sick and things like that as well. Oh, and then, okay, what's the point of the different houses? Because, like the title of the book, House of Earth and Blood, there's these different houses of the magical creatures. There's House of Earth and Blood, House of Sky and Breath, House of Many Waters, House of Flame and Shadow. But it's never really explained why there's the different houses, like what the purpose the houses serve. Like, different kinds of creatures go in different houses. Like, vampires, for example, or like demons are always the Flame and Shadow, or whatever, or I think always, I don't even know. But like why, I couldn't tell you. Okay. It's just disappointing that she did that much world building at the beginning of the book and it still wasn't enough to give a solid foundation for the later parts. Maybe I just read too fast and missed it, but I think that Mass bit off more than she could chew and put too many unnecessary details in and didn't focus on building up the most relevant plot points. On to the characters. Bryce is Aelin from Throne of Glass, Part 2, but worse, and you can fight me. Where Aelin is enjoyable and likable, Bryce is angsty and dramatic. Bryce is supposed to be 25 years old, and I know she's been through a lot, but she just comes across as immature. I'm hopeful to see some character growth in the next books, because throughout this one, she's just a letdown as a protagonist for me. And again, a faded carbon copy of a more successful female lead. Plus, the description of Bryce was just too much. I mean, the girl's boobs and butt are just too big for her to be a professional dancer. She's so flawlessly beautiful that literally every guy wants to sleep with her. Not that I don't support a woman being good looking, but could she at least be realistic and relatable? I think that Sarah J. Maas also messed up by mentioning throughout the book how the magical beings in this world oppress the humans, and that Bryce's life has been made so much harder by being a weak half-human. But then, instead of turning this into a narrative about oppression, she made Bryce a secretly powerful fae. Well, even before we knew that Bryce had magical abilities, she was still somehow more badass than all the magical creatures around her. The character hunt, the romantic interest, is so bland. I can't believe that even a character like Bryce could fall for him. Sure, he's hot and brooding and mysterious, but he has no spark. I didn't feel like he and Bryce had any real chemistry besides physical attraction. I wonder if this means Maas is going to introduce a new or better love interest in the next book or two. And can we all agree that while Bryce is Aelin 2.0 but worse, Hunt is Rhysand 2.0 but worse? Please, Sarah J. Maas, write some new characters for a new series. And as for the rest of the characters, they were about as confusing as the world building. I hated how she referred to characters sometimes by first and sometimes by last name, or sometimes by a nickname to throw you off even more. I'd also like to note that her characters were not relatable. They were struggling with things like the murder of all their friends, or being forced to murder others, or the burden of immortality. I do not struggle with any of these things, and I don't know anyone who does. And can we talk about how Bryce and Hunt chose the weirdest and worst times to have sex? Like when Hunt is mortally wounded, or almost he survives, or right after a major battle. And also there was a major battle where Bryce was doing everything and all the other characters were like sitting in a room watching her on camera. it's about as boring to read as you would expect, and really lame because it offers no opportunity for character growth, no opportunity to learn more about characters. But anyway, finally, the basic this is not finally. Finally, the basic plot and writing of this book was pretty much a miss for me. Again, still hoping that Mass will pull things together in the next book, but this one was rough around the edges. This book is about 800 pages long and probably could be half of that. The bulk of the middle of this book is repetitive and frankly, dull. Bryce goes to the gallery and she and Hunt glare at each other and they find increasingly more vague clues to solving the murders. I'm sorry, Mass was not made to write a murder mystery type book. Her clues were poorly placed. For example, when Bryce... another major plot point of this book that I forgot because this book was really confusing. They are suspecting that the murders are linked to this drug called synth, which amplifies the magic ability of characters to a self-destructive point, basically. And it's illegal, obviously. But one thing in this book, like one of the clues to solving the murder that Sarah J. Maas planted was after the characters found out about the drug synth and what it did, Bryce finds a USB that one of her friends hid that shows a video of the effects of the drug synth. And it's written like it's this big reveal, and I'm like, yo, you had the big reveal in the last chapter. Remember? We talked about this. We know what synth does, homie. Is there any other information on the USB that's like new? Anyway, also I thought that was a lot like Six of Crows, another book that I did not enjoy by Leigh Bardugo, unpopular opinion. But the plot of the book was these kids trying to solve this issue with this magical drug that makes magic users more powerful, but to the point of self-destruction. It's not that original of an idea. Like, it wasn't cool to read that. I was like, yeah, okay, I've heard that before. Like, can we get to something exciting? Anyway, the final reveal of the villain was also not great. The clues were poorly placed, so there wasn't really any evidence for readers to guess who the murderer was. It's not satisfying to figure out who the antagonist is when he has to do a Bond villain-style monologue to reveal how he's been pulling the strings all along. And, oh my god, stop monologuing. You're a murderer. Why do you care if Bryce knows your motivations? Just kill her. At the end of the day, this book would have been at least baseline enjoyable, but the overwrought world building and inexpertly executed clues dampened the overall readability of the novel. The characters weren't very relatable or likable, and the main villain was cartoon character level bad. Despite all this, I'm still excited for a second book. I'm hopeful that the universe Maas built will make more sense and be more familiar. I hope that her characters will grow and become more fleshed out, and I hope that moving forward, the plot will make more sense and be more gripping. Maybe I should have made this its own rant review, but again, I'm still hopeful for the second book. If the second book is equally garbage, we'll do a rant review on the series. Okay? Okay. God, I need a drink after that. Lord of mercy. The next video I post will be, finally, the series that I talked about in my previous video. Was that the previous wrap-up video? And so I'm not going to talk about these two books so much, but I did also read To Kill a Mockingbird and The Lord of the Flies for the first time. I've never read those books before. I read those this month or last month. My one nonfiction read of the month was A Bust and a Half. Not to be a negative Nancy, but it was Last Chance Mustang by Mitchell Bornstein. We'll call him Mitch. This book was really disappointing. It is about the author. It's like a memoir. It could be like a memoir, but it's not. Anyway, Mitch wrote this book about how he's like a horse trainer. He's an attorney by trade, but he also on his free time goes and trains trouble horses. And he goes to train this Mustang named Samson, who is giving his owner a lot of issues. Really, this book, though, kind of seemed like just an opportunity for Mitch to build his ego and just prove what a good horse trainer he is. And if I wanted to read an instruction manual on training a difficult Mustang, he should have just like written that book instead of writing this book. And this book was really oddly organized. There is an entire chapter about equine evolution, which doesn't pertain to the message of the book at all. Whatever. And it's also disappointing. The author, Mitch, did not talk at all about himself. Like when I was like the title, The Story of One Horse, One Horseman, and One Final Shot at Redemption, I thought this was going to be a nice memoir about the personal growth that he went through training this difficult Mustang. No. And anytime that he said something about himself, it was irritating. He basically breaks up with his girlfriend because he's been dating this girl. He's dating this woman, and he ends up moving like farther away from her and closer to the horse that he's training. It's not even his horse. And she gets upset pretty much and is like, you don't spend any time with me. You only care about the horse. And he's just like very casually like, yeah, so like she just broke up with me because of it. And it's like, do you not realize, like, you were a bad boyfriend? And then, he just really plays himself up that, like, all other horse trainers are garbage, and everyone else who had anything to do with the horse was garbage, and he was the only one who could get through to him. And, Mitch, you're not special. Okay? Mitch is a straight white man who believes that he's really special, and I couldn't deal with it. Moving on. This video is going to be stupid long. I am so sorry. Next I'll talk about a duology that I read by Jeremy Findley. The first book is The Darkest Time of Night. Its sequel is The Dark Above. My feedback for both of these books is pretty similar. Figured we'd just knock them out at once. The Darkest Time of Night is his first novel. It really reads like a first novel. The plot to me was really rushed. I didn't really have time. It's supposed to be suspenseful, but because it moved so quickly, there wasn't really time for suspense to build. It just felt like he couldn't stretch out his narrative any farther. So it was just like, go, go, go. The characters to me also didn't feel super three-dimensional. The sequel, The Dark Above, kind of similar thing, really rushed, didn't love the characters. Spoiler alert. There's right before the ending, there's like a fade to black moment that makes you think that the main character has committed suicide. He doesn't, he lives. But I so didn't care about the main character of the book that I wasn't even like, oh no, he killed himself. I was just like, one more thing. So these two books are basically like suspense thriller books about basically like aliens and government conspiracies, and I thought that would be really my speed, but not when it was handled like that. Next, let's talk about Little Nothing by Marisa Silver. This book you will never see coming. It's a dark fairy tale. It's magical realism. It's historical fiction. And it is literally like completely different, like totally like genre bending from any other book that I've read. However, This was still not a really good book. I rated it 3 stars. For me, the biggest downfall for this book was the disconnect that I felt with the characters. This book is 300 pages long. Really, regardless of length, you should be able to build a connection between your reader and your characters. And I did not feel connected to the characters in this book. They were really flat. It was kind of written like a fairy tale. Like, just matter of fact, like this and this happened. So it wasn't a very emotional read. Also, I feel like this book was made or meant to be more symbolic or more allegoric than I was really picking up on. I don't know if that was me being an ignorant reader or if it was Marisa Silver's kind of inability to guide me on her symbolic journey. Like, was I not paying enough attention, or was she not helping me connect the dots? Do you know what I mean? So this was interesting enough, but not my thing. I read 2 Kristin Hanna books this month. So the first Kristin Hanna book that I read in April was The Nightingale. This one is about 2 sisters in France during World War II. I love Hannah's ability to write about relationships within a family. And I love her ability to write endings that are so like painfully bittersweet, and that's, I mean, what this book really delivered on. So I have no complaints. The other Kristin Hanna book I read was The Things We Do for Love. I still rated this book a 5-star. And I still think that it was really excellent. I don't think it was as good as the other books of hers that I've read. I think the premise was a little less original. I felt like it was a little bit more gimmicky, but this is also one of her earlier works, so I can't say that I'm too terribly surprised about that. And again, the foundation of who she is as a writer, her ability to write beautiful family relationships and give you a bittersweet ending that is both happy but not happy in the way that you had planned while you were reading it. So, another good book. And lastly, we'll talk about The Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware. I really enjoy Ruth Ware's thrillers. They don't always have the craziest or like the best twist endings, honestly, but I enjoy them. They're good. They're creepy. They give you the nice like spooky vibes, which I'm all about. This one I thought was super cool because it pairs like gothic horror with like almost postmodern technology, because it's about a nanny who goes to work with this family that lives in a very secluded mansion in like rural Scotland, but also it's a smart house, and it everything is like verbal command in the house, like the lights, the fridge, everything. So that was, I thought, a really cool like dichotomy going on there. Super interesting book. Again, like a ghost story, like almost sci-fi thriller. Like, I really liked that book too. So that is all 12 books that I read in April. Thank you so much for watching. Please stay tuned for my next video that will finally be in the series that I've been trying to start.